Welcome to the Oilers Live podcast. I've got as my guests tonight Sean from TheOilKnight.ca and Kelly from BeerLeagueHeroes.com. That's hero with an E at the end. Thank you guys for joining me again. Tonight, we're going to do the sort of pre-trade deadline episode as well. We had a media availability from Peter Chiarelli earlier today, so it's prime time before the trade deadline on Monday. Thank you guys for joining.
Thanks for having us.
No worries.
So, guys, we were talking before we hit record about Chiarelli's media availabiliity with everyone this morning. It happened at about 10 a.m. Mountain Time. If you haven't watched it or listened to the full thing, I mean, there were some definite themes. Probably the biggest ones that you can take out of what he said today is he talked about adding speed to the roster. And he also he mentioned that he wasn't looking for picks. He was looking for bona fide. I've been saying near-term prospects. I think that's the way I like to look at them. Somebody that can play in the lineup either tomorrow or soon, or it can be somebody you can call up. And then he was talking a little bit about the how much money we're spending on the centers today. Of course, as everybody is well aware, the Oilers are looking at a bit of a cap crunch in the summer because of the two big contracts. So that's probably weighing heavy on his mind. And there's a couple other fun things that I think we'll probably talk about, the three of us. So first off, Sean, maybe we can start with you. I mean, you heard bits and pieces, if not all of the media availability. Anything that you took out of that today?
Well, it kind of speaks to, I wrote an article today about the state of the franchise as far as prospects go and that. And when you look at the roster, you see a 21-year-old McDavid and a 22-year-old Draisaitl, and Puljujarvi's 19 and Nurse is 23. So they've got some young core players. And then, as we know, they've got a bunch of young prospects that are 19 years of age and younger. A lot of guys that we've talked about before, and Yamamoto and Maximoff and Benson and Safin. But in between that, there's not really any NHL-ready forwards that Chiarelli could kind of pull on throughout the season or call up to kind of help out the roster. And I think that's kind of what he touched on today, is there is a gap there, and he is looking to kind of fill that gap if possible. You talked about the NHL ready guys. Typically you're looking at probably guys between the ages of 20 to 23 that could kind of jump up in the roster. So with the UFAs this year, I wouldn't be surprised if Maroon, Letestu, and that are moved for a guy like Josh Ho-Sang or whoever, right, to kind of fill that gap. So that's kind of what I gathered from what he said, that he's aware of I guess the deficiencies in the roster and in the organization, and he's aware of it, and he wants to address it. He did mention that it is hard to pry players like that from other organizations. They're not really looking to give up those type of players. So he did kind of set that expectation, but at least he was kind of aware of what he needed to do, and whether or not that happens remains to be seen.
Yeah. And just a quick plug for anybody listening. Sean put out an article today on TheOilKnight.ca titled, "What Should the Oilers' Game Plan Be on Trade Deadline?" And he talks, a bit about some of those younger prospects that we have, and of course, the lack of NHL-ready prospects on our depth chart. One of the things I had, as you know, I had Jason Strudwick on last episode, and he asked me the question, directed at me or any fan really, which is, if the Oilers go into the trade deadline and they trade away Letestu, they trade away Maroon, they trade away Camilleri. Who's going to fill those spots in the immediate future, right? Like, and that was the question that to me ruined a whole interview, because it really kind of made me down on the the near term or NHL ready prospects, and I think Chiarelli really touched on that today. And to your point, right? Like, this is what you're talking about in your article today, which again, I'm gonna say, if you haven't gone out to read it, go TheOilKnight.ca. It's worth a read. Now, Kelly, what's your thoughts on what you heard today, or what you took from Chiarelli's media availability?
I don't think he said a whole lot that we didn't already know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've been hearing that he wants to add speed, and we've been hearing he's not just blowing it up. Like, a lot of people get pissed off because he didn't tell them anything. He didn't tell the public anything. Well, he's not going to tell the public anything. And if anything, he's going to throw out like misinformation. He's just going to confuse everybody and make everyone angry.
Yeah.
So he's a GM that keeps it right close to the vest, and any rumors that we hear are usually courtesy of other GMs trying to speed up the process or alter the negotiations a bit. But like, I think people, like fans, have to be careful what they wish for, right? If when Chiarelli took over the team, it was a very small, skilled, and a fast team, and he said he was going to add some heaviness to that team, and he added heaviness, and he added it very quickly. He turned the team over very fast at the sacrifice of the smaller skilled players, right? So, would the fans be comfortable if Chiarelli did it again? Like, for example, maybe he says, he calls up Detroit and says, "Hey, look, if you're interested in Draisaitl, I want Athanasiou and I want Dylan Larkin." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and, absolutely. I mean,
there we go.
Yeah.
Speed. Like, that's what you wanted, isn't it? So, like, it's weird. I don't think he would do that, because obviously the value of having McDavid and a Draisaitl at 1 and 2 is so high. So many teams are wishing they had those kinds of players at that age, at that term. So, and the other end of it is, does he trade just to get speed? Like, does he grab some guy that won't turn out long term, but just to add some speed to the lineup? I'm not sure. Like, I just don't know what the fans like really expect him to do right now. It's going to be another like one or 2 years of waiting for the prospects that he's drafted to come up to the system.
Well, I think one of the things, even as I'm talking about having Strudwick on there, is he said, it's his job as a broadcaster to kind of sell hope in this team, and he said it's a difficult prospect right now, or proposition rather, because you're looking at this team and there's nobody on these NHL ready prospects that are going to come in and fill these spots that we're expecting to not be there as of the deadline. And so, it's tough to ask a fan base that has waited so long for success, finally had a taste of it. We have, arguably the best player in the league, and we're going to ask that fan base to be patient for another year. Does Chiarelli even have that long? Right? I mean, my guess would be no. But you're right. He's got a strategy in mind, which he didn't say a ton today, but he kind of laid it out. The one thing I did take from this, and I don't know if you guys got that, but he did say, look, people have been asking about certain players, and he said, they know I'm not trading them. They're not asking anymore. Did you guys catch that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I thought that was, to me, that says, because I think it's a little I don't think there was ever any doubt that he's holding on to Draisaitl. I'm not legitimate doubt, but there were some people that, whether it's clickbait or, they want to be just hope that people are listening to them, they, brought up Draisaitl's name. Sean, what do you think about Clefbaum? I mean, there's a name that's been coming up. Do you think Clefbaum's on the block, or what's your thought on him?
Kind of open up a can of worms with him because I had a few arguments today, I think, on Twitter about him. But I mean, realistically, there's not a lot of pieces on this roster you could move if you are looking to upgrade. I guess the two obvious ones would be Nugent Hopkins or Clefbaum if you want a reasonable return. Like, you got to give up somebody good to get somebody good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I'm just looking at this roster and looking at the future, who we got coming and what have you. And to be honest, I haven't always been the biggest Clefbaum fan. And I think if you look at who could be the most expendable, I think Clefbaum is probably one of those guys you would consider moving. I realize he has a really good contract. There's a lot of value there. So I certainly wouldn't want to trade him for pennies on the dollar. But if you could get some type of overpay to help address the forward depth up front, I think, and I think Chiarelli would consider it. Talking about today when he mentioned people stopped calling about certain players, I'm pretty certain he was referring to Hopkins. I'm not so sure he was mentioning or he was referring to Clefbaum. And when I say that, you kind of look at the development of Nurse this year, and how well he's done, and there's still a lot of left-handed defensemen in the organization. Now, ultimately, you assume that by next year, Secker and Russell both might be gone, and then you would need a Clefbaum. So that's why, I would certainly be hesitant to move him. But if the price is right and you are able to get either a right shot defenseman for him or some forward depth up front, then I would certainly entertain that offer.
So how much of, obviously this is an opinion thing for you, but how much of history for Chiarelli, dictates whether or not he moves Clefbaum? Because I've talked about Clefbaum on other episodes, and he's obviously he's having an off year. There's a ton of people that don't think we should even be playing him right now. He's not the same guy that he was last year, and I think there are a number of factors for that, not the least of which is the hint that he's been injured all year. But the thing that I think about if I'm Chiarelli, and I know, the biggest way to be a fan is to make trades because of the fans, right? Mm-hmm. But if I'm Chiarelli, I'm still thinking about, like, if I trade away a Clefbaum, does that come back to haunt me, next year or whatever? I mean, here's a guy that, do we need to keep him and just sort of see how it plays out? That's kind of what would go through my mind. You think any of that factors in? I mean, he's definitely, I have to believe that he's worried for his job, right? Mm-hmm. Unless if he's heard something, right, and had some, unless if maybe like right now, unless if Cates gave him like a 3-year, or Nicholson, I guess, would be probably the one to make that shot, gave him a 3-year extension sort of right away, then I got to think his trades are a little bit more deliberate and less controversial. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think a lot of this, like, I don't think Clefbaum's going to be moved at the deadline. Like, and maybe that's what he's referring to. Don't even bother calling. I'm not moving him at this point. Yeah. But I mean, one thing we know for sure, he's identified a right shot power play defenseman as a need. And a lot of it, I think, is going to depend on the draft this year. I mean, if the Oilers get a top 5 pick, let's say they get a top 3 pick, and they end up drafting Svechnikov or Zadina, well, then maybe he looks towards moving a forward in order to address that right shot power play defenseman, ideally. Now, if he were to somehow get the first overall pick, or even if he gets 6th or 7th and he takes a Dobson or Ty Smith, well, then maybe he'll be inclined to move Clefbaum because he knows he has one of those guys coming in the next year or two kind of thing, right? So I think a lot of it kind of depends on what happens in the draft. He's not going to move him now, but I don't think he's, like we said, there's hardly anybody untouchable in the NHL these days. If the offer is right and he feels like it'll help his team, I don't think he's going to be gun shy about it despite his past, because he knows he still has holes on this roster. And, you just look on the left side, you could go Nurse, Sekera, Davidson next year, left-hand side, and maybe add somebody. That's still a pretty good, 1, 2, 3 punch on the left side. So, yeah, I mean, I think moving forward, I don't think he's worried about his job. I think he's still looking at, I'm going to do what's best for this team, in my opinion, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. Kelly, your thoughts? I mean, this might be the first time I'd say this, but you're being quiet right now.
Sean's taking the torch, is doing an awesome job. With Clefbaum, like, I think that he's the most likely of the contracted players to get traded, just because of the depth the Oilers have on that left side between like Nurse, Sekera, and Russell and Davidson and whoever else comes in, right? If they draft Dahlin, right, that's another left-handed defenseman they can play. So I think because of Clefbaum's youth and his good contract, he could easily get dealt. And but like, Chiarelli will use those players to get what he wants, like he did with Hall, and to, I guess, to a lesser extent, what he did with Eberle. So it wouldn't surprise me if he traded Clefbaum, let's say, to Boston for Torrey Krug. And Torrey Krug makes, I think he makes $5.5 million, but half his points come on the power play every year. And that's they need a guy who can shoot from the point. I'm not sure if that would be the first choice for him, but I think Boston's got some young guys coming up too, and especially if they deal for Ryan McDonough, they're in a good position. But as far as Chiarelli's job security is, like, when they hired Nicholson, his mandate was to win now.
Of course, Chiarelli's got a mandate to, take this team back to the other level, I guess, right? And he's got a strategy in mind, or something that he's kind of outlaid today, which is, speed and NHL ready players and the right shot D, and we've got some, needs. Clefbaum, maybe you're right. I think probably one of the biggest surprises was, or at least for me, has been how well Davidson has done since he's come back. He had a bit of a slow, a couple of games where he was iffy, but I would suggest, and you're welcome to disagree with me, but I'd suggest that he's done reasonably well, at least in the new year. We lost Kelly again. We're having a few audio problems, but we'll work through it. I guess we got Kelly back, so that's good. Yeah, let's take a break and then we'll come back. We just made it through a couple audio problems, but we managed to get Kelly and Sean back for 2 more segments, so please keep listening. Oilers Live Podcast. And welcome back to the Oilers Live Podcast. I have as my guests Sean from TheOilKnight.ca and Kelly from BeerLeagueHeroes.com. Thanks again for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
No problem.
We're talking trade deadline. We're going to have continue a conversation about the Oilers, and then if we've got time, we'll chat a bit about the league and the deadline coming up and what to expect. Of course, we just had Chiarelli's media availability 10 a.m. this morning. Some interesting things came out of that. Where I want to maybe move to right now is, Kelly, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you expect the Oilers are going to do coming into Monday, or if anything. What do you think is going to happen?
What I expect them to be is like the fallback option for all the major players out there. So those guys going for the Hoffmans or the Paciorettys or the Rick Nashes or like this. I don't expect them to get a lot of business done early. That said, like Chiarelli likes to get his business done beforehand. I think we can expect those UFAs to go with Maroon and Letestu, and I'm not sure about Camilleri. He's been playing pretty well, and maybe that's because he's been in the top 6 for the last week or so. But I think we should expect those guys to go. In terms of the contracted players, I can't see any of the contracted players leaving right now because the team simply needs to ice, have a roster to put out on the ice, and dealing them for the aforementioned AHL players or picks just wouldn't jive. So, what do you guys think about Pat Maroon? I've been hearing that Tampa Bay is in on him, really strong. Boston's in on him. Winnipeg's in on him, and it goes to show you that these heavy players have value when it comes to the postseason. They tend to last a little longer then, and I think it's telling that these good teams are looking at Maroon. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
So Sean, maybe you want to start with that?
As far as Pat Maroon goes, I think there'll definitely be interest. Somebody's definitely going to want him, and he's been a Boston Bruins killer in the past, so it would make a lot of sense if he did go to Boston. I think realistically, going into this trade deadline, it's probably going to be similar to what happened, I guess, 2 years ago when the Oilers kind of dumped some guys for picks. Remember they traded Teddy Purcell for a 3rd round pick. They got rid of Justin Schultz for a 3rd round pick. And then of course we got Maroon there as well for a 4th round pick and a prospect. But even a guy like Philip Larson got traded for a 5th round pick then. That was a guy we never really thought about, and Chiarelli was still able to manage to get something for him. So I'm hoping for this trade deadline we're going to see something similar. As we mentioned before, the whole point of this, I think, is to try and fill that gap with prospects, between the ages of 20 to 23 kind of thing. Ideally, if Maroon brings you back, a pretty good prospect, and the rumor out there, maybe a 2nd round pick. Ideally, I'd like to see, Chiarelli get a little aggressive and maybe flip that 2nd round pick and try and acquire another one of these young guys that would, pretty much jump to the top of the list in Bakersfield at least. That way, at least, build a little bit of strength in the organization, depth in the organization, and then you can address it a little bit further in the future. But the key is trying to acquire those tweeners, AHL, NHL tweeners that still have NHL potential, but are waiver exempt too. That's kind of another big thing. You're able to, even going into next year, if they don't make the team, you still have that option to send them down and call them up later, right? So that's kind of what I'm looking at.
The question I have with Boston, right? If he was to go to Boston, is where does he even play in that lineup, right? Like, is he replaced DeBrusk on the 2nd line? Is that what they're looking at? I mean, because, Maroon's been traditionally, when he's paired with, a highly skilled center, right? That's where he's he's really good, but I don't think do you touch that top line of Boston's? And then, is you think the concern is DeBrusk, like, is not going to take them all the way, like pushing him down to a third line? Is that what's going through their mind? If they're in fact looking at him, is that, I don't know. I can't figure that one out.
I think if Boston does pick him up, it's kind of like, did you read the tweet? I don't know who sent it. I gotta bring it up again here. Someone brought up the idea that Vegas helped out Pittsburgh to get Brassard, so that Brassard wouldn't go to a Western team. Do you know what I mean? Because they're thinking maybe like LA or something like that. So I kind of see it that way with Maroon a little bit too. Like there's nothing wrong with having Maroon on the line with Riley Nash and David Backes. Is Ryan Spooner a top six right wing? Maroon he can play both sides. If you move Heinen down to the fourth line, how strong is that fourth line? Or like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, not. The wings on that second and third line, with the exception of Backes, right? Those are young guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Even Backes can go down as well, but it's a very fluid roster. Sorry, and real nice to have that luxury in the playoffs. And Boston getting him means that Tampa won't have him, or Toronto won't have him, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is too, you got to. I know some of these young guys are having good regular seasons, but we got to keep in mind they're rookies, right? And in the NHL playoffs is a totally different beast. And do you really want Jake DeBrusk on the second line when you're playing Tampa Bay or playing some of the big dogs? Ideally, I think you probably prefer to have him maybe in a third line role, sheltered a little bit, and a guy like Patrick Maroon, who's been there before, who's battled in the playoffs in a top six role, maybe on that second line. I think that's probably a little bit more ideal, and that's maybe what Boston's looking at. They know they have good, young, skilled players, but they're short. Those kids in particular are short on experience, and maybe bringing a guy like Maroon, who can kind of go up and down the lineup, like you said, just kind of gives them that added depth in case the kids aren't ready for playoff hockey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess, and at his cap hit, right? Like his daily cap hit, you don't lose anything, right? If trading for him. You talk about, though, what Chiarelli came out and said today, and said he wants NHL-ready prospects. This might be more in line with the post that you just did, Sean, but, who and what would you take from Boston? I know, and Kelly, you're going to have something to say about this because you've heard some rumors in terms of who might be available or offered. Is that enough? Considering what he's got in mind. Let's start with you, Sean, I guess.
Yeah, well, for me, ideally, if you can get a good prospect and say a second round pick for it, you do it. Now, who the prospect would be is kind of up for debate. Kelly can kind of touch on more with the rumors, what he's hearing out of Boston. But for me personally, Boston is loaded as far as forwards up front. They've got Heinen and they've got DeBrusk impacting now, and they've got Ryan Donato, the young kid playing university there, playing for the Team USA in Olympics. He looks dynamite, and they expect him to jump on the team next year. And they've also got a few young guys in Anders Bjork, who they like a lot, and that Peter, I think it's Chelerick, I think is how he pronounces it. He's a left wing, left shot, big kid, and he's only 22, and he's waiver exempt for the next year or two. I think ideally, if Chiarelli could get either, say, Anders Bjork or Peter Chelerick from Boston in a second round pick, I would be extremely happy. And then, like I said, maybe turn around and flip that second round pick for another 20 to 23-year-old. And then you've got two guys that kind of jump to the top of the list in Bakersfield who are waiver exempt, that if they don't make the team next year, you can kind of give them a tryout this year and fill the fill some of those roster holes for guys that are out. But if they don't make the team next year, it's not the end of the world. They just add depth to the organization by starting out in Bakersfield.
Yeah. And Bakersfield actually has their own problems, right? I mean, they've got a number of their top guys going on UFA right next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we need to obviously shore some of that up, just even to field a team out there, right? Kelly, your thoughts? I mean, what did you heard Zarnik and a second round? Your thoughts?
Yeah. No, that's what I was told on that. I'll be honest, I don't really know a lot about the Bruins prospect system, apart from like your major players, right? So I didn't know Zarnik was a point per game player in the AHL, and I didn't know he was like a NCAA superstar when he played. He's fast, he's zippy, he's like Connor Sherry type. Do you know what I mean? So his playing style fits the description of the kind of player that Chiarelli's looking for.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's what? He's 5'9" and 160 pounds, right? Like that's Chiarelli drafted Yamamoto. This is a Yamamoto type of frame, and I don't know if he's got the same skill level. I've not seen him play, but it sounds like you're saying he might.
Yeah, he's got that same sort of build as Kajula, right? So they're tiny guys, but they get in there. The problem with Zarnik is that he hasn't had the best of luck at the NHL level, where he's kind of like Lander, right? He lights up the AHL like nobody's business, and with Chileric, he's got NHL size. He's big like Kazian, but I'm not sure about his skating, or if he's a fast player, or what kind of style he brings to the team. I'm not sure if he fits the description of what Chiarelli's looking for.
Yeah.
So he's like, maybe like, I think we're gonna end up seeing Chiarelli picking up some little guys. And the other thing with Zarnik is I think he's a right shot too. And with Letestu moving, they'll need a right shot in that on the team.
Yeah, he's a right shot guy. I think what's interesting, given the fact that you heard this rumor, is it looks like the last time Zarnik came into play for Boston was early February. He came up and played 4 games. He's not, I mean, considering he's a rookie, right? He's got 4 points in 10 games. Maybe not the most success. He was used, looks sparingly, but the last 2 games that he was on the big team, he got 13 minutes and 11 minutes time on the ice. So that could be, a sign that they were, showcasing him a little bit. It could lend some credence to exactly what you heard. I'd be curious. I need to watch some of the highlights. I've not seen him play at all.
Is that around the time that those reports of Chiarelli being in Boston, watching the team? Like, was that? Do you know if that's around the same time?
Yeah, I remember that.
So he could have been watching him then. If anything, he would know the player as is. But like, I just wanted to touch on Bakersfield a little bit. I think they're going to fire that coach. I don't think they're happy with Fleming at all. And you hear Stauffer, he talks about Manny Vivrios a lot. I think he's the coach for the Moose Jaw Warriors, and the guy that Bob Stauffer played hockey with in midget, as he loves to talk about. This is a coach that's his reputation he's kind of on the rise right now, and I do wonder if that coach does get hired in Bakersfield to bring up the next wave of Oilers prospects.
Yeah, well, I mean, this completely different subject, right? Obviously, we could go down a whole different path here, but that, I've got to think that is weighing heavily on Chiarelli's mind, as we talk about having NHL ready prospect, right? This is we're at a point now where, with the exception of the usual suspects like Pekarinen and Slepyshev, and we'll talk about this tonight because this is a big deal. Who do you call up if we do trade Maroon and Letestu and anybody else? Who's getting the call up for the second half of the season? There's going to be people, I guess, that'll get a shot. But would you call them up otherwise if you didn't trade away your forwards? So let's maybe put that one on the back burner and remember that subject. Let's talk again. Let's stay on the subject of who, outside of Maroon now, right? Maybe Sean, if we'll maybe get off the Maroon subject for a second. Who else do you think is on the block? And if they are, what are we looking for in return?
Are you talking in terms of Oilers or?
Yeah, in terms of the Oilers right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, Letestu's the obvious one too. I think, anytime you can add a veteran who has playoff experience, right shot centerman who can win draws and penalty kill. I mean, that's valuable for any team going to the playoffs. I have a question for you. Okay. Because
everybody loves Spec. And he's the one everybody loves to hate, I think, out of all the Oilers media. But he did bring up something in the intermission the other day, which is, everybody was complaining about Hendricks being gone. Are we going to have that same complaint, or is there going to be 50% of fans out there that's going to be complaining about Letestu after he's gone, that we're missing his veteran presence? So talk about Letestu, what you think maybe we can get for him and otherwise, and maybe you can touch on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that I guess that's a valid point because they're very similar players, right? For me, I've always been a big Matt Hendricks fan. He's been one of my favorite players forever. Such a class guy, heart and soul guy.
Yeah,
awesome in the locker room. And I guess Letestu's pretty much the same type of player. Realistically, how much are the Oilers really missing Matt Hendricks this year? I mean, that's debatable. I know his leadership is certainly missed, but if the Oilers do ship out Letestu, I don't think it's going to have a dramatic impact because some of the younger guys from last year, like McDavid and Draisaitl, they've grown and developed and matured a lot this year. Come next year again, they're going to be that much further along in their career. So I think they'll be able to handle more than maybe last year. McDavid's first as a captain, right? So I don't think that's really going to affect the team much, and you can always bring in other guys to kind of help replace that. After all, he is a fourth line center. As far as Letestu goes, though, like I said, there's got to be some playoff teams out there that could use him, and I'm sure they will. Ideally, if the Oilers could net themselves a third round pick for him as well, that would be awesome. It's a really deep draft, and then again, you have that possibility of either flipping that pick now at the trade deadline and getting another young prospect in the system, or maybe just wait until the draft and doing that as well. It kind of gives you a little bit more leverage, right? So I think he's pretty much guaranteed he's going to be gone. And I agree with Kelly when he was saying with Camilleri, I'm not really sure you're going to get anything for him at all. If he does get traded, it's going to be for a 6th or 7th round pick, but they may just put him on waivers or just to fill a roster spot for the rest of the year, just let him play it out in Edmonton. But other than that, it's hard to identify anybody else that could be moved or bring in anything reasonable at this point because everybody is so locked up, right? So I think that's pretty much the gist of it. You're looking at, potentially those three, and ideally if you can get 2 prospects and a draft pick out of it, then you got to consider it a win for that trade deadline.
And guys, Kelly, and we haven't talked about this, but I'm kind of curious. I mean, who would be an Oilers target? I mean, if there was somebody out there right now that's kind of in that trade bait or trade list that's available, whether they're I would think more of a non-rental player or somebody who would be a reasonable signing next year. I'll start with Kelly. Is there anybody out there that the Oilers would be targeting? I know we're not buyers, right? We're, in that sellers category, but I would have to think that Chiarelli's still, taking a look around the league. I like Max Domi. I think he'd be a nice pickup. But I just don't know. You put any thought into who we might put in a package to get one of these players that somebody's looking to trade at the deadline?
Well, obviously, like the Mike Hoffman connection is there, and the Senators have been talking, quite a bit in the past little while. I'm not sure what kind of deal he's going to have to make to get Hoffman, but I guess word's out that Ottawa wants to clean house completely, and that means that everyone's gone. Anyone with a contract is gone, so that's an interesting rebuild there. I think I like Max Domi too. I think he's a good buy low candidate, but Chayka might not go for that. Derek Ryan out of Carolina would be a nice addition. He's 31. He's a UFA at the end of the year. I think it'd be a little more likely they'd pick up a Ryan if they were in the playoff race, and Carolina wasn't. But as it is, the tables are turned at this point. Boone Jenner might be a guy. There's, if we're going down that TSN list, there's a few names that really pop out. I wonder what Detroit's going to do. I wonder the teams that are very close to the limit in terms of the 50 contracts. I wonder if the Oilers could pick up a few bodies from there, like Toronto, for example, with Levo. There's quite a list. Like if you could basically make a list of 25 if you sat down and looked at like the TSN trade bait list and just going through the teams that have issues going forth with their cap or contract list.
So, one of the things Chiarelli said today, which is, and I'm quoting from The Athletic, which is Chiarelli said, as far as hockey deals, we're looking at a couple. I don't know where they sit right now. There's some kind of larger action going on right now, and we're not in it. But so much happens in the course of 2, 3, 4 days, so we'll just be on top of it. So obviously some of those types of deals are, being thought out. I think, the interesting one that you brought up would be Derek Ryan. Maybe there's something there, a Letestu type of package or something, but obviously Carolina's sitting at the cusp right now, and I'm not sure Letestu brings anything to that team.
With Carolina, they could be looking at Maroon too. And I did a blog recently about Carolina picking up Maroon for Yanni Kuokkanen and Roland McEwen, a couple of prospects that are look to be kind of stuck down there with due to the depth that Carolina has in their parent club. I mean, Maroon's a big body, and Carolina simply doesn't have a lot of those, and he's a possession player, and we know how much that team likes their fancy stats. So I wouldn't be surprised. That's kind of a wild card team, the Hurricanes, because they're right on the cusp there. They're right in the battle for a wild card spot.
Yeah, they're if they win the next game, they're sitting in the wild card spot. I think one of the interesting things about Carolina that should be noted is they've got new ownership there that's doing just about anything they can to get into the get fans in the stands. So I don't know how much that factors in, but they certainly might make a play for some big players. They're reasonably average sized team. So, a Maroon might come in there and be just what they need. They're, I think if they win the next game, they're sitting in a playoff spot.
Yeah, there's lots of time left too for them. As long as they're in the battle now and nothing drops off for them, they're in a great position to make a big push. And like you said, with that new owner, he seems very aggressive in terms of trying to turn things around for that franchise. And I wouldn't be surprised if his mandate was, I don't care how you do it, bring the team some talent, because we're going to make the playoffs.
So that McEwen that you talked about, he's a right shot D, right? He might be something worth looking at. He's played a couple games on the team. I think he's probably one of those that might be worthwhile. I don't know what we'd have to give up to get him, but
he's a safe player. He's just your two-way, like Alec Martinez. You know what I mean? He's not completely offensive. He's not completely defensive. He sits on that border, and I guess he's kind of a character guy. So
yeah,
good for the team building.
Yeah, your thoughts, Sean? I mean, what if there's some trades out there or some players that the Oilers might target? Chiarelli hinted at it, right? He said he's into some of these hockey deals right now, right? This is not all about selling. There might be some targets that we've got, and we've got some pieces that we'd be willing to move. Carolina, actually, the more I think about this, would be a reasonably good target for us. There's a team that they need to buy in order to get into the playoffs. But your thoughts, Sean?
Yeah, well, they have a real aggressive owner too. Like, he's pretty adamant about his wallet is unlimited. Like, money's not going to be an issue. So if they need somebody, they're going to go out and get them, right? It's quite possible that maybe they're going to be aggressive and go after a guy like Rick Nash. But if they're not able to get someone like that, maybe they do settle for a maroon type. As far as guys that Chiarelli should be targeting, I agree with Kelly that Derek Ryan would be a nice kind of sleeper pickup for the Oilers, and maybe you kind of flip Letestu for him with maroon or whatever. But I mean, he's a right shot centerman, and he's 56% on the faceoffs and that, and he's got a cheap salary, so maybe that's somebody you could use moving forward past this year. Also, I'm a huge Boone Jenner fan. I swear, if the Oilers traded for him, I'd go buy his jersey tomorrow. He's former 30-goal scorer, and I think he's only about 23 years old. And his salary right now, he's an RFA after this year, but I think his salary is like $2.9 million. He's a real bargain, kind of a heart and soul guy. Can play center or the wing. For whatever reason, he's just having an awful year in Columbus, and following Aaron Portzline, a lot of people in Columbus, they never thought that he would be. They thought he was future captain material, and it sounds like that they would be willing to move him. So if the Oilers could somehow swing something there and pry him out of there, I would be ecstatic. But as far as maroon goes, I think kind of just looking at all the teams and looking at their depth charts and who could really use a guy like that, and where could he slot in the roster. The team that kind of stands out for me is Washington. I know last year they kind of loaded up and made a run, and they fell short, but they lost a lot of guys in the offseason. They haven't really replaced them with much. Like, they've got a bunch of young players that are contributing right now. And if I look just on the left side, they've got Ovechkin obviously playing left wing, making $10 million. But after that, they've got Jacob Vrana and Andre Burakovsky, who's got, I think, 16 points.
Yeah.
Left wing Burakovsky, 16 points in 35 games. So they're going into the playoffs with Burakovsky potentially as their second line left winger, and Vrana, I don't know if he's playing third or fourth line at this point, but both of those guys are Burakovsky's 22, and then Vrana's he's 21. So I think those two guys, if you could get either one of those guys potentially for maroon, that would kind of, from Washington's standpoint, they're getting an experienced guy and somebody that's going to help them in the playoffs and a little bit tougher and what have you. And from Edmonton's standpoint, you're getting a young guy that might be able to contribute, a left winger on the left side, right, with some potential. So, as far as a fit goes, I think, and teams are starting to catch up to Washington now too. They're all I mean, Philly's having an amazing second half here. They're right on their heels. So I think Washington's going to be a sneaky team that's going to make some moves, and I think ultimately Maroon might be a good fit there and a team to kind of watch out for.
Yeah, I hadn't put much thought into Washington, but that's certainly an option. They're right up against the cap though, so they whatever they do will have to. They'll have to trade away equal dollars for sure to get within the cap. I think they've got really, they've got no space left.
Right, and I think Burakovsky hit like his cap hit. And I'm not quite sure what it is, but I know his salary. I think he's looking at, is it 2.5 million or 2.75 million? So it'll end up being a little bit more than Maroon. So if they could unload a Burakovsky for Maroon, they're actually taking on less salary and getting a better player for the playoffs in their minds. And maybe Burakovsky, who is one of McDavid's former teammates, maybe he has worn out his welcome in Washington a little bit. I think, talking to some Caps fans. So I think that's a potential fit there, and something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and it might make some sense. I mean, they've got a couple of UFAs coming up. Beagle, if they re-sign them, I guess. But there's and then on the D, right? I guess they picked up Jerabek, who I've heard good things about. He's UFA next year, but I think they picked him up obviously for the run.
And Kempney too, they got for a 3rd round pick.
Oh yeah. That he scored first. I think it might have been his first shift last night. Anyway, I know one of the guys that all of us have interacted with on Twitter, Marcus. Big Capitals fan. He'll probably, I have no doubt he will comment on our discussion around the Capitals and then any possible trade between them and the Oilers. Right now is a good time to take a break. We'll take a break and we'll be right back. Oilers Live Podcast. And welcome back to the Oilers Live podcast. I've got Sean from TheOilKnight.ca and Kelly from BeerLeagueHeroes.com. We're just doing our trade deadline episode. We're going to open it up here for the 3rd segment and talk about trades around the league. Maybe still talk a little bit of Oilers and everything. I know if you got a chance, we'll just put another plug out there. Make sure you stop at TheOilKnight.ca. Sean's put up a recent post about what the Oilers might do. And then, of course, Kelly, you've always got new posts. I think the last one was the Maroon Rumor, if I'm not mistaken. And you find that at BeerLeagueHeroes.com. Let's talk Ottawa, guys. Obviously, with Melnyk at the helm, there's lots going on there. We can be thankful that we've got Cates, who seems to have become a bit of a hermit and living in LA now. What's going on in Ottawa? All right, is Erik Karlsson going to be gone at the deadline? They made some moves today. Interesting moves. What's your thoughts, Kelly?
For Ottawa, the moving Karlsson and Ryan together in a package, that's going to be an interesting deal. I wonder which teams are going to be able to pull off taking that much salary, without moving any back. Whoever does it, like if Tampa finds a way to do that, that'll be outstanding. That'll be one of the greatest hockey teams I think we'll see in a while. Are there any other teams in on Karlsson?
So I haven't heard anything. Sean, have you?
I don't think so. I think it's Tampa or bust, and I don't even think that's real legitimate. But if anybody could do it, Tampa could do it.
So Tampa's got the assets to do it, right? Yeah. Like that's probably the biggest thing. Guys, what about Carolina? I mean, we were talking about this earlier, right? I mean, Carolina's got the cap space to do it, right? They have one of the lowest salaries in the league right now. They're looking at roughly $15 million of cap space right now. And they're sitting in a wild card spot. Or, well, if they win their next game, they're in a wild card spot. Any thoughts on that one? I mean, they've had some inconsistency on defense. I don't know, though. I guess the question is who does Ottawa take in return, right?
Yeah.
Actually, the other team that popped up was Vegas. They've got $7 million in cap space, but they could move some contracts around, and they do have the assets to pick up a guy like Karlsson. And just because they pick up Ryan doesn't mean they can't deal him out either. So that's another team that actually popped up that I've heard.
Can you believe Karlsson's hit right now is 6.5?
It's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, Tampa's only got $2 million in cap space as it is right now. So even that's going to be tough for them to kind of. I know they've got the prospects for it, but money wise, like how are you able to pull that off?
Well, it was Johnson was going to be the centerpiece, right? So Tyler Johnson would have to go back to Ottawa, and then I'm assuming they'd have to pick one of like Colburn and Girardi, or maybe a Callahan to go along with them, and the prospects to boot, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems, and I did see somebody tweet something out today. They said if you thought that Pittsburgh deal was complicated, the Erik Karlsson one's going to be 10 times that or whatever. But I mean, there's so many question marks. Like like if you think about Erik Karlsson, acquire him. First of all, you don't know if he's going to re-sign next year if you acquire him, right? And why would he agree to re-sign with an organization he's never played for yet? So it doesn't make any sense right now for him to do that. So if you're giving up first round picks and all these top prospects, you're going to want to know for sure he's going to be with your team long term. And then in Tampa's case, I mean, they've already got Victor Hedman and Mikhail Sergachev, who are amazing defensemen in the future of the team. I don't see why they need to get another defenseman like Erik Karlsson, as good as he is, and mortgage their future. And I to be honest, I don't really think Steve Yzerman's that kind of guy. I think he's going to stick to the plan. And, maybe if he could acquire somebody like Oscar Klefbom instead, I think he would probably go, or Ryan McDonough, for example, I think would be a perfect fit in Tampa. I just don't see why they would do it. And then the same thing goes for Vegas. I mean, they have a plan. They're way ahead of schedule. Why would you invest so much in a guy in Erik Karlsson and give up, first round picks or whatever? There's no guarantees he's going to re-sign there. He still has, he's still got a lingering injury. Like it's just so many question marks. And the thing is, Erik Karlsson loves Ottawa. He wants to stay there. He just married a girl there, a local girl. I mean, he's pretty, he's been pretty adamant about the fact he wants to stay. So you're gonna piss off your fan base. You're gonna trade away a fan favorite, a guy that wants to be there, the foundation of your organization. Why would you want to trade him away? Or why would you trade him away? If anything, get rid of all the other guys, but keep Karlsson at least. And then for the team, trying to trade for him, it doesn't make sense either. So I wouldn't expect him to get moved. But again, it's the NHL. You never know, right? Everybody's untouchable.
I think one thing with Detroit and Yzerman is you have to remember that, when they were winning their Stanley Cups, they were bringing in like superstar after superstar every year, like older superstars, right? So he's kind of like I guess to say he kind of knows his way around that kind of roster build. So for them, it wouldn't be surprising if they brought in a Karlsson, then found a way to bring in a McDonough, or you know what I mean? And just started loading up on it. And then, Karlsson's not that old. Either is McDonough either. So, and then it's we could be, seeing the new Detroit Red Wings build like that. But I also agree with your point too. There's, they don't have to mortgage their future. They're kind of set up for the next, good 5 years. One point I do want to make is if when you look back at those major deals that involve multiple high-end prospects, how many of those prospects actually turned out, right? When the team that acquires the superstar, maybe 8 or 9 times out of 10, they get the better of the deal. Those rarely do all of those prospects, or one of them turn out to be of quality that they dealt away.
Yeah, I mean but your odds are better than, say, taking picks, right? If you have some idea, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like you look at the Ryan Smith deal when they traded, they got some serviceable NHLers, like the Oilers. I mean, when the Oilers traded Smith to Anders, they got a handful of prospects, right? And those players were just serviceable NHL players. None of them turned out to be quite to the level of Ryan Smith, right?
Yeah, no, and that's I think to be expected. I think though, guys, what I had heard about from Tampa Bay is that those rumors are unlikely at best, and I don't. To be fair, I mean, do you? If you're Stevie Y, right, and you're maybe you take a shot at having Karlsson. If you've certainly, he's got riches to use. The one thing Ottawa does need, though, is they've given up their second and third round next year in a very deep draft, right? And the other sad thing is who's got their first round draft? They traded to
Colorado.
They traded that. It's Colorado. Yeah.
Colorado.
So they're looking. Their first round pick is going to be is Pittsburgh, right? So I mean, the reality is they're going to be picking late in the first round. They've got no second, no third round picks. This is. If the Oilers fans could take one solace right now, it's that we're not Ottawa. Really,
Yeah, it's funny. I saw a poll on Twitter, and they said which team is in the worst shape, and it was Ottawa, Montreal, Edmonton. I can't remember the other team, but I think Edmonton was actually voted as in the worst shape. And I'm just shaking my head, like, are you crazy? Look at the core players we have. Look at the future we have coming. Sure, we don't have much in Bakersfield, but I mean that's something you can replace, but like I'll take McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nurse over any other 3 in the league, right? To build my team around. Like it's crazy. Ottawa's in horrible shape.
One last thing on Ottawa. The best course of action for Ottawa right now is to keep what they have and hope that they can turn it around next year, right? Because the 2020 draft is probably higher end than the 2019 draft. And did I get that right? Yeah.
Or 2018. We still have the 2018 draft. Yeah, 2019.
Sorry, the 2019. Thank you. The 2019 draft is got a higher end than this draft year coming up.
So you're saying take a shot at Hughes?
Well, yeah. You don't if this year they lose the first round draft pick, fine. You don't want to be losing it next year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying.
Don't rebuild right now. They have a team of it's a pretty decent team, but it's just like the Oilers. They're having terrible luck. It's just not working out this year, right? So maybe you go into next year. Maybe you fire the coach. Maybe get rid of Boucher, and then you go into next year and you go on. You gamble on that new coach's bounce, and you hope that everything works out a little better. And then next year, at that trade deadline, you get into it because Doughty could be a UFA and Oliver Ekman-Larsson could be a UFA, and you really get into the trade sweepstakes.
So the only problem I have with that, right, is we're talking trades or picks and their lack of them in 2018. Even if you go into the draft, like a high and deep draft, like 2019, right? And I think Hughes is the lead sort of on that one, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, and he, even if you go into that, you're still talking about, if you don't take, in the top 10, you're probably still talking a couple of years before any of those guys really see, NHL action. So, that kind of patience, while it is worthwhile, I think, to build a team, I'm not sure. Melnyk just doesn't seem like the patient enough guy to kind of allow that to happen.
He's willing to tear it all down, and he knows how long it's going to take to build it back up. So,
well, the thing is too with Ottawa, they're kind of stuck. Their roster is kind of stuck at that age group. You look at Hoffman's making $5.1 million. Well, he's 28, and Bobby Ryan's 30, and he's making $7.25 million for another 4 years. They've got, just looking at the breakdown, they've got Gaborik now on the roster, 36 years old. He's making 4.8. Duchesne's making $6 million. He's 27. They got all these guys in their late 20s, early 30s, tying up all this money that, I understand why they're trying to sell some of these. They want to get younger for sure and get some of these big contracts. They got rid of Phaneuf. They got rid of Brassard now. So they've kind of alleviate some of that pressure, but there's still way too many guys on this roster that are older and making too much money. They free it up, and if they don't, like you said, it's going to be a long rebuild, right? So
they just going by age, they rank 27th in the league right now with 20-man game roster.
Like the oldest or the
oldest?
Youngest? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they're definitely. Of course, they rank near the bottom in just about every category. So
with Karlsson and Ryan, do you think that it would be in the Oilers' interest to try to acquire them? Let's say if for example, if Lucic and one of the defensemen were willing to waive their clauses, would you be willing to try and work a deal around those players to bring in Karlsson and Ryan?
There's no way I would. Not with Ryan's 4 years left at 7.25. Even if they eat, even half that salary, really. It's just too much. And then what are you going to give up? Draisaitl? All this talk on Twitter, people, I think Willis started it. Trading Draisaitl for Karlsson, that's in my mind, that's ridiculous. Draisaitl is unreal. You got McDavid and Draisaitl, 1-2 centers. Why would you ever screw that up for a 27-year-old Karlsson that's got a bum leg? I just, what if just my opinion, but I wouldn't.
Sure. What if it wasn't Draisaitl though? What if it was what if it was Nuge?
Well, even if it's Nuge, you're still going to have to throw in draft picks, right? You're going to have to go first round picks and whatever. I think the goal here is to try and get guys on manageable contracts and acquire and have multiple picks, have guys on entry level contracts coming in every year, kind of build that foundation to take on big ticket players. Even let's be honest, Lucic isn't going anywhere, but even if you were to somehow move Lucic and Nuge, let's say, and get Karlsson, I don't see why Ottawa would do it, and it just doesn't make sense with the Oilers. But I could be wrong, but it just I don't see that.
I will tell you guys, and we're maybe getting into a new subject here, but as of late, my biggest concern is focused less on Lucic and more on Sekera, and this is just my own feeling, right? I like Sekera. When he came back, he while he didn't play very well, he still brought sort of a calming influence to that D-core. But he, he's back on IR, right? And I just have this sinking feeling that this is what we're going to get out of him for the rest of this contract. He's 31 now, right? We're sitting on a $5.5 million contract that, we might be stuck with until 2020, 2021. To me, that's if there's any way to get rid of that contract and bring in, another $3-4 million a year sort of solid D-man and hope that we can find some way to bridge Nurse at a reasonable amount. That's what I'm looking at. Like that to me is the biggest problem we've got, and probably the one reason why I would be scared to trade Clefbaum at this time, right? Is Sekera scares me right now. So we're talking Lucic. This is what brought this to mind. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think if Sekera can turn into like, you remember how Sergei Gonchar was with the Penguins when they won their first cup with Crosby? I think around that time he was playing on one leg, and somehow he found a way to be effective for a little while there before they moved on to him. I think in your scenario, Mike, that's what I would hope for, is that he would be like a power play specialist, and you'd only give him so much ice time, but he'd be a mentor to the young players.
But he's never shown that type of not with the Oilers, that power play prowess, right? That you would sort of want from him. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's his nickname? The
Shin-Pad Assassin.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly don't need that on a power play that is sucking the life out of me every game that we play.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt.
When we get power plays, that is. Yeah.
Sekera is no Gonchar. You still have it?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. My computer's doing funny things right now. So if I drop off on you, my bad.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Sean, on that? I mean, I've completely changed directions for us, but the whole Lucic thing kind of. It sort of made me think about this. I mean, as we talk about Ottawa and just how, some of the things they're stuck with, it's making me think there's a couple things we're definitely stuck with right now. Lucic is one of them. But like I said, I'm most concerned with Sekera. So anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. And I think that in a perfect world, if you could move one guy right now, Sekera would be the guy. You'd want to hang on to Clefbaum and Hopkins, and you'd want to move Sekera, right? The problem is he has a no movement clause. So we talked about the draft and acquiring guys that help kind of bridge the gap. Well, as far as free agents go, and in the offseason, I think it's kind of the same idea. We're probably looking. We'll probably end up signing maybe a couple of guys to 1-year contracts to kind of bridge that gap, because we can't really afford a lot. But next summer is when. Sekera's no movement clause contract is reduced to a limited no trade clause, which means he can be moved. Because I don't see why he would waive that clause right now. And when he's injured, you can't trade him anyways, or you could, I guess, technically, but he's not going to waive it, right? So yeah, you're looking at if you can get rid of his $5.5 million next summer, you do it, and that frees up a lot of money elsewhere, and then. Russell's a different story.
Well, so guys, this is not going to be popular, and when I say it, I'm sure if anybody's listening, they might even comment on it. But I don't have a huge problem with the Russell contract, or to me, right? If you can get a number of guys at that $4 million range, right? Give or take $1 million. I don't care over the whole of the roster, right? If you can get a couple guys, solid D guys in that $4 million range. So I shouldn't say I don't care about the Russell contract. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's a little bit long, and Chiarelli obviously is public enemy number one, and people want to pick on that, but the no movement clause is probably the biggest problem I've got with it. But Sekera, to me, right? Like, if I wouldn't have felt this way until this year, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just more of a bad feeling for me, I think. And here's the other thing that might set some people off. I still think there's hope for Lucic, right? And the only reason I say that is he's not shied away from the fact that he knows what's wrong with his game. and a lot can happen in an off season. And he's 29 years old. He's been brutal this year. There's no denying that. I think actually probably if he did anything in the off season, I'd buy the guy a shooter tutor. Because somebody tweeted about it earlier. It's like you hear the back of the back glass, puck going against the back of the glass, and it's Lucic, right? Like he's missed more nets this year than anybody. He's probably got a hell of a Corsi number, though. Yeah. Anyway, but back to Sekera. That's my biggest concern right now. And we didn't replace him this year, right? We see how much his absence, or the absence of a guy that can play those kind of minutes, is hurting us. What happens if he's, this is it? What if he's like, going to be injured year over year now?
Well, that gives you cap space, I guess, right?
LTIR.
Yeah, well, if he's on IR, I guess, right?
You kind of hoping for that actually in those players' cases, right? In a very crass way, but in terms Lucic is hilarious. Every 5 years, he goes into a slump. If you check his hockey DB, starting with his rookie year, every 5 years he goes into just a horrid slump. It's weird. I know I was listening to Stauffer the other day. Because Spectre was on there, and they were talking about how Lucic, he weighs nearly 240 pounds right now, and he has to find a way to get that down to 215. And Lucic is completely aware of that. But what I think Spectre was questioning is that, can Lucic's body do that? Is it like a biological thing? Can he get down to that weight and stay there? And that could be a big concern too. But it's also on the coaching staff to put Lucic in a role where he'll succeed too. So, whatever that means for Lucic, until the time comes to where the Oilers can either buy the contract out or they can trade him. That's kind of on the coaching staff too. That's where they get paid the second highest wage in the NHL. McClellan was the highest paid coach in the league until Babcock got hired, right? So that's. Yeah, and Lucic has only got one shot. He shoots for the 5-hole every time. He's got nothing else. I figure if he just takes the puck and just skates towards the net and just and doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Hopefully someone will bump him and just maybe the puck will trickle in or something.
Well, and the thing is with Lucic too, with me, I appreciate him for who he is. I know he's limited, and I used to always joke that when he's stick handling, it seems like he's stick handling with a stick that has no blade. He's almost like ringette or whatever, right? But he's got a certain style and skill set, and this is kind of goes back to the coaching staff. He's a limited player, but he can be effective if you put him in certain roles. And some of this, we have to attribute some of this to the power play. Look how good he was on the power play last year and how many points he got. And look how bad the power play is this year. And a lot of it is fundamentals. And a lot of it is, the Oilers aren't shooting. And, I know I tweeted out so many times, Lucic is just standing in front of the net, parking his big rear end there, and the Oilers are passing when they should be shooting. And, he's not getting that success, getting those goals on the power play. And then 5-on-5, I've maintained when he came on the team, and I've maintained every year since he's been on, that he should always be playing with Draisaitl. I think they're the best fit. He kind of plays more of he reads like a European. He used to play with Kopitar and Krejci. Those are his two main guys. And, with Draisaitl, they just seem to read the game the same way. And he can't keep up with McDavid. And for whatever reason, I don't think he has good chemistry with Hopkins at all. So as a coach, you almost have to kind of recognize, okay, Lucic is who he is. We need to put him with a center we know he's going to have success with. And then on the power play, he's in front of the net. We have to take advantage of that. We should be shooting. So many teams score on the Oilers with somebody in front. Our goalie can't see it. Well, Lucic is in front of their goalie every time, but we're not shooting the puck. We're passing it. Yeah. And I think a lot of that has affected his game. And then that leads, translates into frustration. And then, the fans get on or whatever. But I think it's a poor, I think he's probably, at all the players on our team, he's probably maybe besides Slepyshev, the worst managed player by the coaching staff, in my opinion.
I can go with that. I might add Puljujärvi to that group too.
Yeah, I guess Puljujärvi too. But
let's add in Kajula.
So all the young players basically went on and Lucic, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I actually, when you look at Lucic's numbers, so you're talking about the power play. Last year he had 25 points on the power play versus 6 so far this year. He would be on pace for the same point level if the power play was clicking. And you know what's interesting about that, now that I look at that, is that could be said about almost every player on the Oilers this year.
Imagine Draisaitl. How many power play points he had? Imagine how many points he'd have this year.
So let's switch gears a bit, because actually I want to wrap this up probably in the next 10 or 15 minutes, guys. So only because there'll probably be a ton of editing to do. But let's talk about the game last night, because I've been watching the whole year. How is it that anybody could have been down on Draisaitl this year? I mean, the guy, at one point I heard people saying, well, now he's got the big contract, he's not playing anymore. He's been unbelievable in the last 10 games, and last night, I mean, that's like playoff hockey from last year. Draisaitl, those were 2 world-class goals. Like, they call him the German Gretzky for that reason. Those were outstanding. The only thing that bugs me about them is that we had him on the same line as McDavid. So if that's it, right? That's the only thing that bothered me about our game last night. So I don't know, you guys, thoughts on the game last night, thoughts on the Oilers as we move into the last part of the year, right? Maybe Sean, go ahead.
Oh, okay. The Draisaitl McDavid thing drives me nuts, but ideally when the trade deadline's over, I'm hoping like heck they move Draisaitl back to center and put him with Slepyshev and Puljujärvi, and let's just let those kids develop and let them play with some real talent. Like, this is crazy. But with Draisaitl, I mean, earlier in the year, you could tell the pressure of the contract was getting to him. I mean, there was no question. He was gripping his stick tight, and he had to justify his contract and all that stuff. And that happens. That happens in every team when guys sign big money contracts. But I mean, fans are quick to jump on certain players, and for whatever reason, and it's not really fair. And I've always been a huge Draisaitl fan. It's the first jersey that I bought since my Dougie Weight jersey. I've always been a huge fan of him. I love how smart he is, how he thinks the game, and how tough he is on himself, and just continues to push himself. Right. And so I mean, I don't really understand the whole trade Draisaitl talk. We could get somebody else better. Like, why would you want to move that guy? As far as I'm concerned, they're this generation, they're the Crosby Malkin kind of thing. The next version of it. Give them a couple more years or whatever, and they'll be right up with those guys, right? So, I mean, as far as the game goes, it was a good game, but there's still a lot of coaching question marks for me as far as line combinations go. But hopefully, after the trade deadline, we'll kind of straighten that out a bit.
Yeah, I don't know what. I mean, we're going to have to see what the team looks like, but I sure hope that this is something where McClellan says, okay, this is the team I have, and let's see what they're really made of. I like that line combination you put together there, Slepyshev and Puljujarvi. I'd like to see that with Draisaitl. That's, that would sort of, that line there is, they're big guys, they're fast guys. Like, that's a beautiful second line behind a McDavid line.
Well, and today too, Peter Chiarelli, in that, and kind of go back we were talking about earlier, in his presser, he did mention that, he he's looking forward to playing the younger guys more, right? So hopefully the coach kind of takes that into consideration when he's drawing up his lines and doesn't bump Pakarinen up to the second line or whatever, right? Or Camilleri, if he does stick around, doesn't still play on the second line. Like, you got to give these kids an opportunity. And, I hear even Joel Quenneville saying the same thing in Chicago. All our young guys, now that we're out of it, they're going to, get a bump up in the lineup and get some more experience. Let's see what they're all about. So hopefully the Oilers follow suit.
Yeah. Kelly, your thoughts both on the game tomorrow? Maybe, this is kind of like our final thoughts for the night, I guess, but your thoughts? Or the game last night, rather.
Yeah, sure. The for the last few games, I've liked what the bottom six have been doing. Letestu's obviously playing well because he's going to get traded, but Kazian's been playing better, and Puljujarvi didn't look out of sorts with Kazian and Letestu. Kyra, he's still looking pretty good. I like with those kind of the secondary and the tertiary scores are putting up for the Oilers right now. I'm seeing a little more effort recently, and when it comes to McDavid and Draisaitl, we all grew up watching the Penguins with Lemieux and Yeager and Francis, and they didn't play those guys on the same line all the time, but they played them on the same line when they needed to, and that's the kind of flexibility I like in a roster, when you can put some massive talent together to combat the other team's first line, and which is basically what happened last night with McKinnon, right? He's seen McDavid's line nearly every shift he was out. I think I'll be really pissed off if they trade Slepyshev, because he's coming on real hard right now, and if he's a winger for either McDavid or Draisaitl, I think he'd be perfect for them, because he'll shoot the puck when it's given to him. These things are looking up. It's a bad season. I wish they didn't fuck up the special teams. I wish they'd have got a better backup so they didn't have to overplay Talbot last year and then have him play through an injury this year until that whole beginning of the year when he's playing through that injury, it just screwed up their entire year because everyone lost confidence, and that just carried over month to month to month, right? So I'm hoping that Chiarelli has learned his lesson from last summer and this year.
So don't start the season obituary just yet, because I've got to have an episode for that yet. We'll save that till the bitter end, and then we'll do a run through. But
absolutely,
what we didn't talk about tonight, guys, and and I know the three of us will get on here again and have another chat. We didn't talk about goaltending. And, obviously, whether or not you think Montoya is the answer, which I suspect there's not, he's not. But we have to talk goaltending at some point. And anyway, so, last thoughts, guys. Maybe Kelly, we'll go back to you. Last thoughts as we head into the deadline. What any sort of parting messages?
I'm just hoping that Chiarelli has a good deadline, because I'm sick and tired of reading all the anti-Chiarelli rhetoric on Twitter, and I really want him to pick up some pieces for the farm, and I want to, new blood excites me. I like to see new players in an Oilers uniform. The deadline's generally a really exciting time of the year for me as an Oilers fan and as a hockey fan. I just hope he does the right thing.
Yeah. And Sean, any parting thoughts?
Just a couple things with, first of all, Laurent Brossoit, I think, will be traded at the deadline, too. That's somebody we forgot to mention. I think his days are up in Edmonton. What we get for him is yet to be seen, but I think he'll be a guy that'll be moved. Also, Florida owes us future considerations for Greg Chase. It would be nice if we got a draft pick out of that, but we'll see what happens there. But as far as, the overall feeling on the Oilers, we're all on Twitter, and you kind of get, I had a rant there the other day, you kind of get a sense there's a lot of gloom and doom surrounding the Oilers. And for me, I kind of look at it differently. For so many years, this organization drafted like shit. Like we had, other than the top overall picks, and even those some of them were questionable, we really don't have anybody. And you look in Bakersfield right now, there's only one guy that was here before Chiarelli, drafted before Chiarelli, that's a forward, and that was Kyle Platzer. So, and pretty much everybody else that's in there is Chiarelli is brought in. I know there's a lot of people calling for his head, but be careful what you wish for. If you look at Boston's last draft before he was let go there, it's still paying dividends. They got Pasternak 25th overall. They drafted Donato in the second round. They got Heinen. They got Bjork that's coming. They got all those guys that are coming now. Boston's reaping those benefits today, and that was from 2014. So just imagine what's going to happen, from Chiarelli's drafts the previous 3 years, I guess, since he's been here. There's lots of talent coming. We have an amazing core, but there is a gap, right? And that's kind of the main thing. And it's kind of shown its ugly head this year. We don't have anybody we can call up to kind of fill in those roster gaps. So he needs to address that, and that's what I'm hoping he does address in the trade deadline. But I don't see why or how anybody is so down on this organization in the future. We're screwed. There's so much talent on the team already and talent coming. Just got to fill in that gap for a year or so. And they can do that quite easily by moving a few guys around. So if anybody is still listening, I just want to say, Oilers Nation, stay positive. Like there's brighter days ahead, believe me.
Yeah, I've got to think that, when you've got a Connor McDavid and a Draisaitl and two guys that are just going to get better, right? And I don't even think that, you mentioned it before. Draisaitl, if you were to add in he's at a point, practically a point a game right now, and he's had 6 power play points, right? How many teams in this league are, screaming about a guy that they say, typically the thing is you got a guy that's got, a point a game, but they say, most of those are on a power play, right? But you're not saying that with him right now. He's all points 5-on-5, and he's been outstanding. The other thing I saw a tweet about today was, just comparing his numbers to Matthews, and don't get me wrong, I think Matthews is on par with the best in the league, if not the world. But they're expecting Matthews' contract to come in above Connor McDavid's, and I would suggest to you that Draisaitl, given what we can see over the next over this year and what I would expect from him next year, he's worth that 8.5, if not more, probably on another team. Just given what, like last night, sure, McDavid scored the winner, but don't fool yourself. That was all Draisaitl, right? We saw him in the playoffs act like that. He's and you're right. He started out slow, so pressure of a big contract, which he's got to fulfill this year, right? So My thoughts on the Oilers as we head into the deadline. I'm very curious as to what I would like to see. We talked about the hockey trades. I'd like to see the Oilers maybe make some of those trades and look to other teams that pick up a couple of guys that maybe we can get some surprise wingers out of. I don't know who that is. I haven't put enough thought into that yet, but that's the kind of trades I'd like to see. I've got a feeling that, depending on what happens in the next couple days, the biggest news might be that Maroon doesn't end up going anywhere. And I'm just going to put that out there. That way I can say it here, and if anybody heard it, they can then say, well, you know what? I heard on the Oilers Live podcast that he's not going anywhere. I actually, Chiarelli talked about it today. He did ask those guys if they would re-sign. If there's a chance to get Maroon at a deal right now, if there's any chance at all, I say take it. I don't know if that's popular or unpopular, but if you can get him for 3 or 4 years or even 2 years at a reasonable rate, he's I think he's a character guy that I think he's a likable guy that everybody on the team likes. And then maybe move some of those other pieces for, if you can get some prospects of any sort, even somebody to shore up Bakersfield. Anyway, thanks, guys, again for another great podcast. It's too bad we had some audio problems. So to the listeners, you just have to make do. Right? If you want good quality guests like Sean and Kelly, then and they're coming from all sorts of corners of the world, this is what we have to put up with, I guess. So thanks again, guys.
No worries.